What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazique, aka Unique Mazique, the hardest working man in sports and gaming. And I am a fight guy, a Forbes contributor, and also write for heavy.com. And I got my fellow fight guy with me, Peter Kahn. We are powered by Fight TV and presented by Bet Online. If you're watching this video on Fight TV, make sure you search Fight Guys on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like and share. If you're watching it on YouTube, go to Fight TV and subscribe to the app. What's going on, Peter?
Hey, everything's great. It seems like day 2000 in quarantine.
For sure.
Other than that, everything is good, and just looking forward to getting into it with you today. So what do you say we get into round one?
For sure.
So look, the big news yesterday, UFC 249 was canceled. After all the conversation, after all the back and forth, after all the secrecy, after all the excitement that fans had that they were going to get to watch what was really going to be a spectacular card, has now been canceled. And of course, we learned that it was going to be at Tachi Palace in California. And literally right up until the last minute here, just over a week out, I guess eventually Dana White kept pushing, and it looks like Disney, ESPN came in and made the final call that this wasn't going to happen. And look, we broke down some of these fights last week. You were going to break them down in more detail next week, and I can tell you the biggest losers in all of this are the sports bettors. Bet Online had odds for every single fight on this card. Sports bettors who have been without basketball and baseball and hockey, no March Madness, no NBA Finals, no NHL, no opening day of baseball. This was a glimmer of hope that they were going to be able to bet on live sports and a great show at that, and that now is not the case. So, I really don't know what that says about future events for the UFC. I know Dana White mentioned a private island. Boxing is basically shut down for the foreseeable future, but this is where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, I totally, you mentioned sports bettors being some of the biggest losers, and I totally agree, and I see that. And yes, Dana White did confirm with Brett Okamoto of ESPN that it was going to be Tachi Palace, and he showed a lot of gratitude towards them. He said that he appreciated them standing in the trenches with him and sticking with him when everybody else was kind of going against the event. So a lot of people stand on different sides of the fence with whether or not he should have or shouldn't have been doing the event. So there's a lot of opinions out there about that. But he said that he guarantees that when they do come back to the state of California, they're going to do their show at the Tachi Palace because he wants to give them that revenue, give them that shine for sticking with them. But another group of people who stand to really lose with this is the freelance sports writers who cover combat sports, because there's nothing going on, as you mentioned. There's nothing to write about. A lot of people are having to be very creative to have topics to discuss. And those people thought, like, on one side of their head, I know they're like, you know what, this probably maybe is a tough thing, a tough event to have. But man, I sure would love to have something to write about right now, because obviously that's their revenue too. So it's almost, they're almost in the same situation as the fighters, because fighters don't get paid if they don't fight unless they have some sort of other sponsorship deal that's paying them regardless. And freelance sports writers don't get paid unless they have something to write about, because most of them are getting paid on a per article or traffic basis. So that's a small sect of the MMA community, combat sports community overall, that often probably doesn't get discussed. But because I've been and am a part of that on some levels, I always remember that. But I'm hoping that we see sports just return in regularity. I'm also hoping that this doesn't drastically change the way that the whole combat sports arena is absorbed by fans. That's like the thing, more so than wanting this thing to happen. That's more so where I am. Also, you mentioned the island. He did confirm that as well. He said Fight Island is a real thing,
Right.
which I think can be a ridiculous, kind of a promotional thing going forward. But it's probably best if we do that when it's safe to do it. So let's jump into our first Between the Rounds. Between the Rounds, we're talking about Vasyl Lomachenko, and he did an interview yesterday, and he touched on a few topics. And like I said, a lot of people are looking for things to discuss. I mean, so we already know that he's supposed to take on Teofimo Lopez at some point. Was supposed to be this year, but obviously that all of that's up in the air with COVID-19 and so on and so forth. But so they just get to talking to Lomachenko, and he says, and I quote, he says, "I have to be in shape, always be ready. I would like to fight somebody who is undefeated, somebody who has a good history and a big name. I think the person would be Floyd Mayweather Jr." So obviously it's still that way, that anytime Floyd's name is mentioned, it creates some level of attention. Either you're irked by it, you're intrigued by it, for whatever reason, it gets some attention. So I don't know, what do you think about Lomachenko even mentioning Floyd's name at this point?
I'm starting to think that Vasyl Lomachenko does not want to fight Teofimo Lopez. And, this is something that I've talked about before. It's something I've alluded to with you, which is that the last time that Lomachenko fought was when he fought Luke Campbell in London. Mm-hmm. And, with the coronavirus and the sport on hold, who knows when he will be back in the ring again. And, there's a good argument to be made that he might actually feel. Now, remember, originally the fight against Lopez for the undisputed lightweight championship was going to take place May 30th in New York. Now, although there hadn't been an official announcement, although, there were still things they were working out in their deal, at least May 30th from an activity standpoint would have been reasonable as far as, Lomachenko feeling that, it wasn't too much time in between fights for such a big and meaningful fight. And I'm starting to believe that he would like to take a fight in between fighting Lopez, if that's an option, because who knows when this would potentially actually take place. I mean, it's conceivable that Lomachenko could be out of the ring for over a year. The other thing is, I think that, look, it's unrealistic. I mean, Lomachenko fighting at 35 is pushing it to begin with. So I think that Lomachenko was probably thinking about going back down to 130, let alone talking about fighting Floyd Mayweather. I mean, look, I think it's a distraction. Maybe it was a little bit of bait to see if Floyd reacts to that, because obviously there would be a lot of money in that fight. But I don't see that being an option for them as far as Mayweather and Lomachenko fighting each other. I clearly feel that at this point, maybe he's in fact trying to avoid fighting Teofimo Lopez.
I do have to say, just to be fair, Lomachenko did address Teofimo Lopez in the interview. He says, "I want this fight because he is a world champion and he holds my belt, the IBF title. The most interesting thing for me will be to look into his eyes and his father's eyes and see their reaction after the fight." So I wanted to be fair and just at least let it be known that he's not completely glossing over the Lopez thing. But it is interesting, as you said, that he would bring up Floyd Mayweather.
I mean, look, just a few more seconds on this. He wouldn't bring it up if there wasn't a reason to bring it up. Otherwise, he would stick to, let's get right to Lopez. I think he's sprinkling it out there. Like I said, he doesn't even have a deal in place yet to fight Lopez. From what I understand, there were still some issues that they were working out. I heard Lomachenko doesn't want to fight in New York. He might want a little bit more money, but that's something that we can, continue to keep our eye on. Right now, there's really nothing from a date perspective to talk about, but it definitely makes for interesting conversation. So how about round two?
Absolutely.
So going back to the UFC dialogue, recently, Mike Tyson said that boxers will always make more money than MMA fighters. Now, in fact, the whole comment was MMA will always have more views and stuff than boxing, but boxers will always make more money than MMA fighters. And he said that to Brant James during a podcast episode. But here's the thing. I don't agree with Mike. I do agree that boxers make more money, and it's the reason why McGregor fought Mayweather, okay? Because you could never dream of making that type of money defending the title in the UFC. But I do believe that boxing and the viewership is definitely on the uptick, and I do think that there are a lot of shows that have been competing with viewership and maybe surpassing viewership in boxing again. But look, as far as purse money, it's not even a conversation. I mean, look, there's really, the UFC, Bellator, and one championship, right? Would you say? I mean, as far as the three
PFL,
major
PFL, Professional Fighters League, yeah.
But they're just not making the type of money.
No.
The main event fighters and champions, and this. You write about UFC, you write about ONE and Bellator. You cover all MMA. I mean, you report on what the purses are. I mean, you're really best suited. So, what do you think about Mike's topic?
Well, I honestly think that he's spot on. I think that the way the UFC is operating now, the UFC is trying their best to create an almost NFL-like model, where weekly we have a fight. Weekly we have an event. Now, obviously, some weeks are bigger than others because you have the McGregor week, the John Jones week. Maybe you might have a Brock Lesnar week if he comes back, or if you can get you get the bigger weeks where you get the bigger stars. But every week, our fans have a fight, have a event in which to watch, and there's a uniformity to it. And there are fans that respond to that uniformity, and they build it into as a routine, and they watch it on generally the same network, and it runs in this way. Boxing doesn't have that uniformity, and I think that's why you have more of a different of an ebb and flow in terms of the following from fans. Well, you get one guy who may get 800,000 peak viewers for Showtime. You get Broner's getting that, or maybe Deontay's getting that on Showtime. Right. And then you'll have another fight one week, and it'll be severely, just drastically different. I think there's more of a median there with UFC because their fans are like, I showed up to watch mixed martial arts. Obviously, yeah, you have some big draws, but it is what it is. From a money standpoint, their money is more capped. And Dana White and the UFC doesn't, from a percentage standpoint, from the percentage that the fighters are paid based off of the amount of revenue that the organization takes in,
right,
is nowhere near. It's nowhere near what you would see in most collective bargaining agreements for most professional sports leagues. So because of that, and because the fighters work in that structure, they will never make what boxers make. Boxers are essentially writing their own check in a degree. And I don't mean, I know the promoters are who pays them and what, and that decides that, but a boxer's individual fame better impacts how much they make than it does in mixed martial arts.
Brian, who's the top star in the UFC right now?
Conor.
Okay. How much is he making in the octagon?
It's never really totally disclosed, but the amount of money that he makes for one fight, for like a big fight, like he threw a number out there for the Cerrone fight, which turned out to be, kind of exaggerated in some ways, but it looked like he made about $25 million, $30 million.
Okay, so
which is nothing compared to what his equivalent would make in boxing.
So Anthony Joshua crushed that in the rematch against Ruiz. Both Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury made more than that in their second fight together.
Yes.
And then you have guys like Canelo, who's already beating that. So I mean, we can keep going weight class by weight class.
It'll always be that way. Yep.
And look, and remember, you're talking. He's the top. Okay,
yes, he's the top, and I mean, literally, he has nobody that's even really close.
Right. So that's what I was going to ask you. What's second? Who's second?
Right now, it would probably have if you were talking about active people, it's John Jones is second, and it's a distant second.
Well, that's what I'm asking. What kind of numbers?
John is I would guess without looking at it right now, John is probably getting somewhere like $3 to $5 million a fight at the most.
Right. Okay. So that's just
now we're talking about, for most people, by most people's standards, the greatest fighter to ever live.
I get it. And what I'm saying,
and he's only getting $3 to $5 million.
Right. And that's on par with an Errol Spence, Terence Crawford. Yeah. That's on par with, some of the champions, not necessarily superstars, that are making money. Yeah. But like we said, I mean, look, we know there's a big disparity there. And look, there's a reason why Dana White has been teasing the launch of Zuffa Boxing. There's a reason, because he got a taste of that during the Mayweather McGregor fight. He really saw the potential, and he's a boxing fan.
He's a boxing guy first.
Yeah, he's a boxing guy first, and he's very smart, right? He knows the business, and so because he knows the business, and because he's had so much success in creating what he created with the UFC, I think that the lack of control for him is an obstacle. And, the idea that he would always have to be working with other people, that there would be another decision maker in the room, right, is somewhat something that has caused him to pause. And then he did an interview recently where he talked about boxing, being a shit show. Yeah, that's how he described it. And I think Frank Warren then came on and kind of rebutted it. But I don't find that to be accurate. It's just a business model that's not in line with what he's used to.
Yes,
with what he created with the UFC.
Absolutely, yeah. And people, if you got a person that's a control freak, and you put them in a situation where they can't control it, they freak out. So that's just pretty much what it is. So let's dip into our next between the rounds. And this one I think is also pretty interesting, because we were talking a little bit about things or people who have lost in this situation. And we talked about sports bettors. We talked about freelance combat sports writers. And obviously we've talked about fighters, but there's a specific group of fighters who have been in a tough situation as this, how this in this particular situation. And it's the fighters who had huge fights lined up, signed, sealed. I'm not talking about just discussed. Right. I'm talking about agreed upon fights.
Biggest purse of their lives.
Biggest purse of their lives. Fighters who are good fighters, championship level fighters, but who haven't had that stage or platform yet to really maybe elevate themselves. And so, I mean, we're going to talk to somebody in a second who can speak directly to that. But I want to hear some of your thoughts on that, Peter, because even some people in your camp may have been approaching that space.
Absolutely. And look, there are fighters of all levels, but, one that sticks out, and, before we get into our guest, one that sticks out is Jose Ramirez. Jose Ramirez was supposed to fight Victor Postal. He was supposed to fight Victor Postal in China when this whole thing started in China with the coronavirus. That got postponed. That was then going to get moved to May 9th in Fresno. That got postponed. And, this was going to be probably a career high because what was going to happen is originally, and see, this is how the domino effect really takes place. He was going to fight Postal. With all things, considered, he was the favorite. He beats Postal. He then moves on to fight Josh Taylor. And that would have been the biggest fight of his career and the biggest payday of his career. And everything was just set up for him. Well, none of it's happened now. Right. And not only has none of it happened, but there's just no tentative date for it to pick back up. And then, the question is, do they go back and do they fight the postal fight? Does Taylor fight who he was going to fight? Do they just go and fight each other? Do they try to make up for lost ground? In the meantime, fighters spend money in camp. You know, I mean, look, we could take it back to the UFC fighters. All these guys that just put in time, money, preparation in advance of these fights are getting nothing.
Yeah, paying nutritionists who still got to get paid.
Everybody,
because they gave you money, because they gave you food.
Right. I mean, it's just, you know, across the board. And so, yeah, even in my own camp, I mean, I had George Kambosos Jr. fighting a very meaningful fight on May 9th, which was against Lee Selby for the IBF Eliminator. And the reason that's important is because the winner of that fight would have become the mandatory for Teofimo Lopez for that IBF title, which theoretically means that the winner of Lomachenko Lopez would have been forced to fight the winner of Kambosos Selby for that lightweight, you know, for that IBF title, if they wanted to keep that title. So the point is that, you know, it has an effect from the top to the bottom, but a lot of guys have lost income, and it's now going to take, remember, this isn't like most other sports. Right. When this ramps back up and they say, okay, boxing resumes. Look, DAZN just came out yesterday and basically said they've put all boxing on hold until July.
Yep. And they also said that they would freeze their subscriber bases, memberships. Right. But they were going to work hard to still put content up.
Right. So, you know, the point that I'm making is that if a fighter has a fight that's, say, scheduled now for, you know, let's just say they say, okay, in July, we're all able to get back at it. Well, these guys need, we've talked about it before, they need a good 6 to 8 week training camp, especially now that they haven't been in the gym as consistently. So you're talking, I mean, September before some of these guys get back in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, and some of them may have to work off some of these Corona calories. So, you know,
and you know, and they're not getting paid salaries.
No. So it's gonna be interesting, you know, and like I said, I can't wait. We're gonna actually we're gonna actually talk to somebody who can speak directly to this particular subject. Jamel Herring, current world champion, had just a magnificent fight on his schedule that now is, you know, on pause. So we're going to talk to him in a second. But before we get into that, we got to go into round 3. And round 3, we're going to talk about Floyd Mayweather's likeness and this deal that he has put together, really. And I really got to give Floyd a lot of credit. I mean, everybody knows that Floyd Mayweather is a outstanding businessman. Everybody knows that. He somehow just continues to keep himself in the conversation, and he's always finding a way to monetize something. But he has finalized a deal. It's a joint venture with the owner of Fubo TV streaming service and FaceBank Group, and it basically is an agreement that will serve to manage his virtual likeness. So honestly, this whole concept is really super interesting, above and beyond Floyd, because it kind of gets into the whole what if scenarios. So essentially what they're talking about being able to do is to show and create some sort of presentation with this tech that can have virtual Mayweather against virtual some other fighter who in a fight that we could never see. And so they're literally taking this footage and they're calculating punch speeds and all of these different other physical attributes. And they're essentially like doing, it's almost like it's very much like a sports video game, but it almost sounds as if it goes a step even further than that. And I'm interested in seeing that because, man, especially right now, depending on how quickly they could put something like this together, because you don't know how long this has been in development. But if ESPN or Showtime broadcast Sugar Ray Leonard versus virtual Sugar Ray Leonard versus virtual Floyd Mayweather Jr., people would watch that right now. They would absolutely watch that.
So, Brian, does this surprise you?
Not at all.
I mean, you talked about Dana White being a control freak. I think Floyd is a bigger control freak.
And that now here's the thing. That's one thing, and I don't want to cut you off. I want to hear what you got to say. But that's the thing that worries me. right? Because if Floyd is associated with this,
Yeah.
I'm worried if he says, you know what, I'm only doing this if you make it that my virtual likeness wins every fight.
Brian, you're stealing my thunder here.
That's the thing that worries me.
That's my whole point.
Yeah, that's my worry.
You just took it.
I'm sorry.
You just grabbed it from me.
I'm so sorry.
You're being very Floyd right now.
It's a bald thing.
No, but to your point, and I was going to say that. I was going to say, you know, I wonder if he would find it acceptable from a historical standpoint that he could be beaten. Because you just, based on what you said about, you know, Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Sugar Ray Leonard or Sugar Ray Robinson, or how does that translate into different weight classes? Is it going to just become Floyd Mayweather Jr. beats Muhammad Ali, Floyd Mayweather Jr. beats Bernard Hopkins, Floyd Mayweather Jr. beats Joe Louis, Floyd Mayweather Jr. beats Marvin Hagler, and, you know, and Hearns? I mean, is it going to become that, or is it going to become where different circumstances and, you know, different things are at play? I mean, has any of that been released? I mean, I just saw this news come out yesterday as well. And
yeah, none of that's been released, but I think we're both on the same.
Are we making assumptions right now?
No, because I don't think we're making assumptions. I think we're taking the information that's been given, which is literally, It's been said that the point of this is to be able to create these matchups. Even Floyd commented on that, being able to create matchups that you couldn't see. So with him saying that, and with us just really thinking back on just the things that Floyd has shown us, Floyd doesn't get involved with things that he can't control.
Does this open the door then for him to be his own publisher of a new boxing video game where it's Floyd Mayweather's, you know, fight, whatever, right?
It totally could. And I think it makes it even harder for somebody to create a boxing game and hope and wanting to put him in it, which I don't even think matters at this point anymore.
Right.
But it would make it harder for for people to do that. But I don't know. I got one last thing, I guess, to say about this whole thing is Floyd's insistence upon controlling anything that he's involved with is somewhat understandable, but it's also what keeps anything he does from having any soul to it. And it's like,
really?
It really does. Because
but you don't think that it's just him as a smart businessman? You know, people think just because
that's why I say
he's a great fighter. Yeah. I mean, because, you know, wouldn't he want to protect his image and likeness? And wouldn't he? I mean, look, Floyd is, as many people might think, he's unreasonable. I mean, I think from the purity of the sport and what he's represented for the sport, I mean, we're making a lot of assumptions. We don't know what it's going to become. But, you know, do you really think that it would lack, you know, like you said, soul?
I think it does lack soul. If the whole point of this show, if the integrity of the show is to be able, and the integrity of these presentations, or this whole concept is to say who would win between this fighter and this fighter, and this particular program, app, or whatever it is designed to answer those questions for us. If the answer to every question that is involved with Floyd is Floyd wins simply because I won't be involved with it unless I do, then it compromises the integrity of the whole exercise. So to me, if you have no integrity, you have no soul. So that, and I'm not saying he has no integrity. I'm saying that the presentation from a business standpoint, do I understand why he would want to control things that way? Totally.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm actually interested in seeing what the final product's going to be.
I'm going to be there front and center. But I think it's the same thing as, like, I think Floyd has had an absolutely fascinating life. If you, just from what we know, from childhood, from the things he's had to overcome to what he is now, all the mistakes and the bad things that have happened that he's done and hasn't done, or he's been affected by. I think there's a remarkable story there. But I just question whether or not Floyd would ever let it be seriously, or whether he would ever allow it to be truthfully told without taking control of it and making himself Superman in it. So to me, it's the same type of concept. I can't let you have my boxing likeness unless you let me win every fight. And I won't let you tell my story unless you make me look like this. And to me, that's when the soul is potentially lost. All right, it is my pleasure to welcome in Jamel Herring, WBO junior lightweight champion. It's a pleasure to get an opportunity to speak to you today. How you doing today, Jamel?
I'm doing all right. It's a pleasure to see you guys again. I'm glad to see you guys looking nice and healthy. So that's a plus. But
Yes.
it's just great just to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's all we can ask for at this stage of the game. We're all in quarantine, so it's
right.
like we're going anywhere. As long as we're healthy, we're winning right now.
Exactly.
So talking about winning, I was at your most two recent fights. I was in Kissimmee when you won the world title. I was in the corral inside of ringside, up close and personal when you beat Ito, which was an excellent performance.
Thank you.
You won your first world title. And I was also inside the corral, just so happened in Fresno, when you had that grand entrance and you had a
crazy environment.
But it was a dominating performance against Roach, even though you got buzzed toward the end of the fight. 11th round, and you came back and closed out strong. But I mean, it was a dominating performance, your first title defense. And then here you were, primed for your biggest payday and biggest fight of your career. You were going to Belfast in June, I believe maybe June 13th, to fight Carl Frampton. Right. And the only thing that could knock Jamel Herring out is a coronavirus.
It pretty much knocked everybody out.
So that's where we're at. What are your thoughts right now? And what have you been up to? And what have you heard as far as possible return? And will that fight eventually take place when things resume to our new normal?
For the most part, I'm still in good spirits. You see me, I was kind of upset. Like I think yesterday an article came out when I think it just got pushed back. Frank Warren, they said it's getting pushed back to like maybe end the mid-summer time frame, but it still works for me. It's still around that same time frame. June's is still summer pretty much. So, but for the most part, like I said, I'm in good spirits. I like I said, I believe the fight still will happen. I know, like I said, Carl wants to fight. I want to fight. It's obviously a fight people are asking for. So me, Pete, I never want to let anybody down. So like if the people want to fight, I'm not going to just walk away from it just because the whole world has a setback. So like I said, you just gotta stay positive and just be patient.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things to look at, Jamel, is by the time you fight, the last time you fought was in November of 2019. How are you, are you a little bit concerned with the fact that maybe you'll be close to a year on a layoff by the time you have a fight? Because I think this will be the biggest gap between fights for you in ever, honestly, ever. Like I'm looking at like your whole professional career, and it's never been this long between fights. Right.
I mean, if you look at it, you gotta look at it in somewhat of a positive light. You could basically say like, because both me and Carl fought in November. I just fought in the beginning of the month, and he fought later on in the end. So basically, still pretty much on the same same even playing field. But for the most part, like in terms of the body. That's what you really want to focus on more, is how your body feels going into fights, especially fights that big, and then you have all that ring rust. But right now, like you guys can see my face, even with the facial hair and everything, that I still maintain my weight. I don't really blow up in between fights. Pete can tell you I work with Perfecting Athletes. So
I was thinking about that right now.
Of course, Paulina, she checks in with me every single day, just to see how I'm doing for the most part, mentally and physically. But Paulina doesn't has a regimen where she doesn't want us to go over too high of a weight limit. So as long as I continue just take care of my body and get out there and I go out do some road work, some running, just to keep the weight down and somewhat in shape. Like I said, I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah, and you have that discipline. I mean, sorry to cut you off there, Brian. I was going to say, being a Marine. This is just, I know that your whole life is a very structured, regimented, routine oriented. I know you probably stick to that. And of course, I was thinking about Perfecting Athletes, and how you were managing the weight, because I remember how you were talking about, I was in the dressing room before you fought Ito. Right. And Paulina was actually working on your traps or your shoulder or something. and you're like, man, they got me down to 129 and whatever the weight was.
Yeah.
And you were still talking about it the minutes before you were going to walk out. And so, how do you feel about that? And how do you feel that affects Frampton, if at all?
Like I said, for me, Beth, just as well as anyone else, Pete. Like, as a fighter, you basically at the end of the day, you get to worry about yourself because you may not know, he may have his best performance, he may have his worst performance. So, but at the end of the day, you still have to worry about what you're capable of doing. And so, with that being said, I know we all know he had issues with his hands and things of that nature, and they kind of say he's deteriorating at this stage, but I can't really focus on, what's going on with him because, like I said, he wants to make history. This fight, if he wins this fight, he becomes the first three-time world division champion, the world champion to win titles in 3 divisions from Ireland. So, of course, if anything, mentally, I'm expecting, the best Carl Frampton, especially if I'm willing to go over in his backyard. If somebody was, willing to come over, to my backyard and there's a history-making fight, of course, mentally, for me, I'm going to be at my best as well. So, at the most part, I'm just preparing for the best Carl Frampton. But I'm just excited because, like you said, it's that Marine Corps regiment in me. Like, I have no issue going anywhere with a fight set, and I'm just excited because not too many world champions can say that they fought on a big stage where you could possibly fight in a venue. Well, and in Europe, in a football stadium that holds 25,000 plus, fans. So that for me is my motivation, just to keep a good, a clear head of things, and just staying positive, and just excited. I'm still excited at the end of the day.
I had a question. I wanted, because you both mentioned perfecting athletes, and I think that it's something that really needs to be highlighted just in both, I would say, boxing and in mixed martial arts. It's just about staying in a position from a fitness level, even when you're not fighting, especially when you're not fighting, especially when you're not training, where you don't allow yourself to go too far out of shape, which would then ultimately create this really intense cut, which is when the real dangers start to come in from a combat sports standpoint. So can you talk a little bit about the impact that you have felt? Because I know you haven't dealt with perfecting athletes your entire career. So you have a time period that was before then and then now.
I think I've been dealing with them my last 5 fights now. And it's crazy. Like, I never had it. Like, at one point in time, I was fighting at 135 pounds before I came in with them. I thought they were actually crazy when I did 130. To be honest with you, but I never had an issue making 135 pounds either. But when I brought them on board, it's funny that I could say, like, I'm actually making 130 pounds a lot easier with them on board than when I was before I had them and making 135 pounds, and that's because like, most things with them is more scientific, and once you start trusting them, because, like, a lot of us, a lot of fighters are still old school. Like, we believe in the whole, shutting everything down and the week of the fight type deal. But with them, they slowly, gradually break things down. And at first I was hesitant, but once I fully said, okay, let me just listen to them and see how it goes, it became a lot easier, to the fact that, like, now I know, even when they're not around, I know where I need to be at. I know how to take care of myself for the most part. Well, like I said, we're dealing with combat sports. Their main thing is protecting the brain. And a lot of fighters, because we all seen in this past couple of years, a lot of fighters just passing away tragically because they don't have the right fluid, enough fluid in their body to protect their brain. So their main thing is always staying hydrated. And I was never big on drinking water, like, as much as they want, like, as much as you're supposed to. So when they came on board, I started drinking like a gallon to a gallon and a half every single day during camp, and it helps your body get used to it. So where when it's time to actually cut the weight, your body, you basically fool your body into thinking, well, he's putting his water in him so much for the last 8 weeks. Okay, we don't mind, letting him release all this water, because your body was like a sponge. So if it feels like it's not getting enough, it try to keep on as much water and food as it possibly can. But when you do the right things, it makes it a lot easier to lose the weight, and plus put it back on you without feeling sluggish for fight night.
Man, Paulina, Denise, and Michelle would be so proud of you right now.
Oh yeah.
Because obviously you've heard it a million times. The body has one job, and that's to stay alive.
Exactly.
Right. And so, one of the things that a lot of people don't know, and we can shed some light on this, is that when Jamel hits fight week, and he lands in the city, whether it's whatever it is, whether it was Kissimmee or Fresno in his last 2 fights, the first thing he has to do is he has to walk up to Pete Sousan's room, and he has to get on that scale and show him the trunks. And you get on that scale, and the first thing Pete Sousan's does is text message the matchmakers the weight. And in some cases, it could raise an eyebrow and be concerning. But the minute they know you're working with perfecting athletes, they don't. That's it. It's like, okay, it's all good.
We'll see you at the weigh-in.
See you at the weigh-in, and they don't ask me. But there is a trust factor because it all has to do. It takes both parties in this case to participate and have that trust and follow the program. And like Jamel said, and I've had this with guys that I represent and Jamel knows. I mean, a lot of my fighters, all of them basically are working with perfecting athletes. And once that trust is there, then you just follow what they say and you do what you do. And look, I'm going to tell you, when Roach kind of caught you in that 11th round, I turned to Javier Centeno, trainer that was sitting next to me. And I said, he recovered so quickly. And I said, it's attributed to being hydrated and the brain being able to bounce back. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's kind of the first thing that came into my mind.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I'm glad, I'm glad I could just speak openly with you guys, because a lot of people don't know this. But Pete, you was there watching the fight, and I don't knock Lamont, because, like I said, in the heat of the moment, things happen.
Right.
But I remember getting hit repeatedly in the back of the head over and over with rabbit punches, and like I said, the 11th round, I think it basically all that caught up with me. It was a good clean shot behind the ear, so it knocked my whole equilibrium off. But after that fight, when I won't walk back, because Paulina still wants to check up on you and everything. A lot of people don't know, man. I had a post concussion from that. I mean, it's crazy. I like for the last few months, I've actually still been healing. I had swelling I had swelling on the back of my head, but like Pete pointed out, if it wasn't due to the rehydrating the right way. It probably could have been a lot worse.
It would have been a lot worse.
Yeah, it would have been a lot worse. It probably would have been a knockout, to be honest with you. Probably would have been a knockout. But like I said,
he was getting desperate in that fight because he couldn't work his way in, and he was doing.
So when he got in,
he was holding and hitting.
And sometimes he hit me in the back of the head, and it kind of added up. But
but you recovered, and you were hydrated.
Recovered. But true story, the night Frampton fought McCreary, I actually didn't want to go to I didn't want to go to Vegas because I was still suffering from the swelling. I was still in pain. And this is weeks later after the fight. Usually at the fight, after like a week or so.
It was November 29th, I believe.
Yeah,
besides Xander on that show.
But but Paulina checked me again. She said you still have swelling. You still have swelling on the back of your head. So, but people don't know, especially with athletes, sometimes we have to put on our poker face. But like in secret, I've been healing for the past couple of months since that fight. Actually, I'm still, my body, I'm just now getting back to being normal or feeling normal. But that's why I was trying to preach to fighters how important it is, like you said, to take care of your body, because we've already seen too many accidents in the sport. And it was like, man, I don't know what would happen if I didn't have Paulina and perfecting athletes. But I'm a true testament to their work really saves lives, because man, I'm telling you, it was to the point where I couldn't even sleep in the back. I couldn't even lay in the back of my head without feeling pressure and pain. So that goes to you to how I for months I was just laying on the side of my head because the pressure on the back of my head was so intense that it was crazy. But I kept checking in with the doctors. I got cleared. It was at a point where Paulina even referred me to a chiropractor. That's how bad it had gotten. But over the weeks, I've been getting better. So I think that's another reason why I haven't really too much complaining about this whole Frampton thing.
Yeah, actually worked out.
I'm healing. I'm healing. My body's healing more. So it's like I'd rather be safe than sorry at the end of the day. But yeah, like I said, right now, when we do get things back in order, I can go back to training. 100%, because after a while, it was to a point where even when I did start getting back in the gym, Paulina would not refer me to I couldn't do no sparring, I couldn't do no contact. But now I'm getting, close to 100% again. I feel confident going into a camp and then, handling my business for the 6 to 8 weeks. But yeah, man, like I say, like, even though the virus sucks, but the timing is kind of like, for me, it's like a blessing in disguise. It lets me just, enjoy life and just heal up.
So what are you doing to stay busy?
For me, I usually work out around the house, or I go out. Like me, being a Marine, I love going outside to go run. So when I can, if I get up early enough, I just go out, just get a good, nice, good breeze and get some air. And I just run for a few miles just to keep the weight. And for me, that keeps the weight down because I break out a good sweat, and it keeps, it keeps me from, really blowing up in weight and things like that. And I just, just do much like cardio, as much cardio as I can around the house. So that's how I've been keeping my weight down and just, staying loose.
Yeah. So what have you been doing other than that, like entertainment-wise?
Oh, entertainment-wise? Oh, I've been on my PlayStation. So anybody wants to look up me on PS4, it's Mel11HOVA. But I'm mad at everybody. Like I mean, like hundreds of friends on PlayStation 4.
All right, give it one more time. Give it one more time.
Mel, MEL11, because 11 is my favorite number, and HOVA.
HOVA, like
Hove. Yep.
Yeah.
That was
right.
my favorite.
That's what I figured. That's what I figured.
Growing up,
throwing up the diamond. Right.
Yeah, but like for the most part, I just like to stay busy. Also, I like this right now. I enjoy doing interviews, podcasts, just to stay out there, let people know how I'm doing, and just to interact with the fans out there. It was always great, especially on social media. When fans ask questions, me, I'm quick to reply. I'll give my opinion and go from there. But
wait, you give your opinion?
Yeah, I give my opinion.
So I never noticed. You are one of the you're one of the more entertaining people on Twitter.
Sure.
It's a lot of people.
I try to be fan friendly because, like I said, in the end of the day, I don't look at myself as being better than anybody.
Right.
I was always taught to give people, if you give me respect, I give you the same respect in the end. Because, like I say, even with the media, I don't agree with a lot of fighters, even at my level, when they don't like doing things with the media. Because I feel like this, like, I need you guys to stay relevant, just as much as maybe you guys need to boost up your profile as well, whatever. But like, I don't. So that's why I'm always like open to speaking with anybody, especially if and I look at it like this also. I guess it's just me being humble, but like, I'd rather have people actually want to talk to me than people not want to talk to you, because it's like, obviously I must be doing something right for to get some type of attention when people actually want to tune in and see how I'm doing, because it could be worse when people don't care about you and it's like, he was yesterday's news. So as long as I'm here, might as well just soak it up and make the most of it.
For sure. Yeah. I know you mentioned that you game. So which games do you play primarily?
Oh, me being in the military, obviously everything is on Battlefield or Call of Duty. But I don't. If you want to get to like the once in a while I get into like the sports, but I don't get like Shakur Stevenson and Bud Crawford, who are too competitive, and I'm putting them out there like that. But right now I'm playing a lot of Resident Evil, because I'm from the old school of PlayStation 1, so I'm always keeping tune with what's going with the remakes and things like that. But for me, a lot of action. But if it's a fun game, I'll give it a try, and go from there.
So have you? I know you were talking about Bud and Shakur. What they play Madden a lot, I'm assuming.
Madden, NBA, that's their crowd. They're in that crowd. So how competitive that can get and ugly that can be. But lately, Shakur and Bud, they've been doing a lot of Call of Duty.
Yeah. I pretty much everybody is right now. It's pretty much everybody. So you were saying you're an old school gamer with Resident Evil, and I definitely remember playing Resident Evil, and I also did play the remake. So I love to get your opinion on the remake, and then obviously there's another remake coming too.
Oh, all right. Resident Evil 2 remake was good. The one from last year was pretty good. It was kind of, to me, in my opinion, a little basically identical with the original. But the new one, Resident Evil 3, I think they took a lot of the horror feel out of it. I know it's supposed to be more action in it, but some of they left a lot of important details from the original out of it. But right now I make the most of it, because what else can I do?
Right. I got you. I got you. I got you. Well, man, I was hoping that we might be able to set up a little match or something. Maybe we get an opportunity to play 2K, play Madden. I am mostly a sports gamer for sure. Back in the day, I did used to play a lot of like Resident Evil. I played all of those games.
Right.
But I don't know, man. I've gotten to a point, but being a sports fan first, I play those more. But you know what's funny is that I've realized that a lot of athletes, especially fighters, a lot of them don't like to play sports games as much, because I had one tell me, Demetrius Johnson, the former UFC champion, current one championship flyweight champion. Oh, well, he's gonna be challenging for the one championship flyweight championship. He told me he doesn't really like to play sports games. He says, because I'm an athlete in real life and I play video games to go to a fantasy place. So do you kind of think that you're kind of in the same way, as that's why you kind of lean more towards non-sports?
No, I mean, I play my sports game. I just haven't been too big on the online in sports games like that. Yeah, like me. Like I play franchise mode. Me, I do a lot of like more of the career franchise mode thing. That's right. About the sports games. But like one game, and I want to say at least he has a game. You know, boxes, we don't have a game. You know.
Oh, don't get Brian started.
I'm about to go.
Hold on. Here we go. Go down that road, Brian.
You got to think
pick his brain. Pick his brain.
When you're growing up as a kid, you know, I remember playing games from of course, the Punch Out to the Muhammad Ali, Kings, the Muhammad, even the Genesis, Evander Holyfield, Real Deal Boxing, and all games like that.
Yes.
Now I'm a world champion. I can't be featured in a box.
You just became Brian's the biggest advocate. So Brian, go ahead. You might as well just pick his brain.
I wrote an article. I said and this was almost a year ago. I said it's been 2,989 days since the last boxing game was released. So because the last one that came out was Fight Night Champion. And that was in 2009. I'm sorry, 2011. So we're talking about 9 years since the last game. And like I was telling Peter, I said, I think that a lot of these, the developers, they feel like if they can't get Floyd or they can't get Manny or they can't get Canelo, then there's no reason for them to make a boxing game. And I just think that's just flawed thinking, for real. It is what it is, man.
We got to get it together.
We got to get it together, man. We got to get it together. We got to.
I know. I'm pretty sure you guys say too. I keep seeing developers saying that they're making a boxing game for this year.
Man, people have called me up and told me that they want me basically to every single time they have a development about their game, because they know that I write about boxing and they know that I write about gaming. So it's right in my dual alley, right? They're like, oh, every time we have an update, we want you to post it. They'll send me one thing, and they'll get stuck in some portion of their development process, and it just dies.
Right.
So, I mean, I've had people send me mock-ups of Gerald McClellan. Mock-ups. You saw that?
Zab Judah.
Mock-ups
of how the gyms look. And then
the
ring card girl.
Listen, Jamel's going to have to be the, he'll have to be the actual, athlete expert.
I mean, I see Eddie Herman has been preaching for a game as well.
Yeah, he has.
We need EA Sports to get on it, because, like I said, they quickly jump on the UFC bandwagon, which is cool. I have nothing against the UFC, but a lot of those fans that play the UFC games came from the Fight Night series. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's true.
But you know what? I have a philosophy about that, and I don't want to digress forever. But Jamel, I want you to weigh in on this. So, because of the amount of development time that it would take to make a game. A champion could win a title, defend it, lose a title. It could be a year later, right, before this game comes out, and then maybe it's not as fresh. At least in the UFC, they're constantly keeping these guys busy and bringing them back. Boxing still isn't in that way. It's getting better where a loss is acceptable. Guys can be brought back, but better than anyone. I mean, especially with your career, this.
Yeah.
Right. You could be put on the shelf. You could be in no man's land. And what I'm saying is, I think if boxing could, and Brian and I have talked about this, and I'm being serious now, if there was a way that they can figure out how to incorporate, current fighters or how to create something that would resonate with the fans and make them feel like they're actually putting these two guys against each other, but at the same time have the ability to create their own characters there would have to be some balance, because remember, from production, and I don't know how long these things take. Maybe it's more than a year. You know, maybe it takes 2 years to develop these things. I don't even know.
Especially with new software, because like I said, it's been over 10 years since the last one. So you have to basically build it ground up now. You can't use the same engine that you were using.
They would use, if EA does it, they would use the UFC engine. But the fighters, that's not really a big deal, because the game is the deal, because you can create somebody's head and body in a week.
But Jamel wants to be himself in a fight.
No, that's what I'm saying. All they need is a picture of you, and they can create you, and it'll look like a photorealistic version of you.
It's crazy.
Hey, Brian, I mean, I know you have it sitting there at your fingertips. Show them what the person you work with did with Kobe.
So a person that I work with did this Kobe off of a picture.
Off of a picture?
Off of a picture. Because obviously it's off of a picture, because this was recent.
Right.
Yeah, they did this recently.
That's crazy.
Off of a picture, you know, and then they did young Kobe off of a picture. You know what I'm saying? So and he turned that around. This is just an independent guy. He turned this around in like a week. You know, I had another kid that I was working with who was doing all retro NBA players, and he could do it in a day and a half.
Brian, we got to cash in on this.
Yeah. All right, man. I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much for jumping on with us, and hopefully we get a chance to talk again.
All right, all good seeing you guys, man.
All right, yes, sir.
Take care, Jamel. Be well.
All right, that's all we got for you today. I appreciate everybody watching. As I said before, if you're watching this on Fight TV, make sure you head over to YouTube, search The Fight Guys, and subscribe to the channel. Means a lot to us. Also, make sure you leave a like and share the videos as well. We have separate standalone interviews, as well as separate standalone hot takes and topics on everything combat sports. If you are watching this on YouTube, make sure you head over to the Fight TV app and subscribe to that streaming service.
And
for my man, Peter,
before you get rid of me, before you get rid of us,
I don't want to get rid of you.
Before you get rid of us, we just want to let these guys know, you know, leave us comments, participate in the comments. Let's get some dialogue going. Follow us on Twitter. You know, we want to hear from you.
For sure.
All right, now you can go back and say goodbye.
Bye.